we're back. So, debating reality. Here we are once again talking about conspiracy theories, talking about events that have happened that we are led to believe are real events, that possibly are real events, but they also add to interesting conspiracies where there's a pro and con on either side. So, instead of looking at aliens and man on the moon, we're this time looking at a very public event, one that is still kind of raw in people's minds, so to speak, and we're talking about the 9/11 event, the World Trade Towers going down. Now, as we all know, 4 planes took off, and 2 of them hit the World Trade Center, 2 towers, and 1 hit the Pentagon, and another crash landed and was made a movie by Paul Greengrass. What is it? United 93?
Flight 93.
Flight 93. It was United Airlines.
Yeah.
Flight 93. So, either way is, now that time has passed, a lot more conspiracy theories have developed around the factor of, well, wait a minute, those towers went down very fast, well, really slow, but they went down very fast like they do in the demolition in a movie. So conspiracies have arisen that the planes actually hit the towers. Were the government behind it? And how did it actually happen? So we're going to have a pro and con on this side and everything. And so what we want to do is we want to start with the most impassioned side, which is going to be con, that no, 9/11 is a tragedy. Shouldn't have happened, but it has happened in our lifetime, but it's not a conspiracy. And so we're going to ask you guys to come up and state your case.
Hey, the 9/11 conspiracies. In the cold light of day after the event, you can analyse and microanalyse what happened. And you can say, well, what about this bit, what about this bit, what about this bit? I have never seen any convincing evidence that 9/11 was a conspiracy, because if it was, who were the conspirators? Was it the government? Was it some kind of world elite? I have no idea, but I'm not interested, because it was a hijacking. It was a very well coordinated and very well planned hijacking by members of Al-Qaeda. They very cleverly hijacked planes that were due to fly long distances across America, and so those planes were full of jet fuel. And when you crash a plane filled with jet fuel into a building, it's going to cause an enormous explosion, a huge fire, and the intensity of those fires and those explosions was enough to bring down those buildings.
Seriously though, would it have that much jet fuel in it, because it just come from right the way across the other side of the world?
No, these planes had just taken off from their destination, from their origins on the East Coast. I believe they were due to fly out to the West Coast of America, and that's why the hijackers chose those particular flights to hijack, because they knew the planes would be full of fuel, and so they would have so much more destructive power than if it had just been like a very short haul flight. So those planes, as we know from the footage, they hit the buildings, they caused these tremendous explosions, and such was the force and the severity of those explosions that it was sufficient to actually break the outer shell of those World Trade Center buildings. Much of the structural integrity of those World Trade Center towers was in the outer shell of the building, and then once inside the building, the explosion was enough to blast away the fireproofing around these structural supports, and the intensity of that extremely hot fire was enough to just melt the steel, destroy the floors, and then eventually the structural integrity of the buildings was so badly damaged that they couldn't survive. And then once the building started to collapse, then it was just like a kind of concertina effect, down floor by floor by floor by floor, and the buildings were completely destroyed. So as I say, I've never seen any convincing evidence of the whole demolition theory, because if you were going to crash planes into buildings, why would you then set off bombs on each floor of the building to bring down the building you've already decided is going to be destroyed by planes? Or, if you flip it on its head, if there were explosives packed into the buildings, why then go to all the trouble to crash planes into them? It's overkill, it's too much, as far as I'm concerned. So that's the crux of my argument. It's perfectly feasible to have a conspiracy, not a conspiracy, a terrorist plot of hijackers who very well organised, very well coordinated, managed to hijack those 4 planes. 3 of them were successful in striking the buildings they were intended to strike. The 4th one, the one that came down in Pennsylvania, because that happened later than the other events, it meant that the families of those passengers on the plane were able to contact them. There was telephone calls going on, and so those passengers got wind of the fact that this was a wide-scale plot, and those passengers then decided to take it on themselves to try and stop the hijackers, which is how the 4th plane failed in its mission and it was brought down in the field in Pennsylvania.
Okay. Well said, Nigel. Sounds like a movie. Why would they, I don't know, bring the whole building down to get rid of evidence maybe? Because we have no evidence that there was any sign of any planes that hit those buildings in the aftermath, in the ground zero hole of the plane. But, let's leave it up to my partner here, Rachel, to really emphasize that point.
Okay, so if you've seen any footage of any of the 9/11 aeroplane disasters, basically what it shows, there's various footage showing the buildings from all different angles. By the time the second building was hit by an aeroplane, almost everybody had out their phones taking video evidence of it. The first time round, there is video evidence from a helicopter that was actually told to move away from the building. It shows the plane going into the first building and actually coming out to the other side. At that point, the helicopter was told to move on because there was an explosion in the second building, which they weren't sure was caused by the first aeroplane. But on most of the videos that you actually see or that came out on the news at that time, didn't show the aeroplane coming right the way through the whole building of the first building. So it had actually been edited out, or it had been faded to black, basically, so you couldn't see it come out. And also as well, what they didn't show as well was the second building. They didn't show the second explosion in the second building, so they edited that out as well because they wanted to show an aeroplane going into it, whereas this didn't show an aeroplane, it just showed an explosion, which kind of makes you think, well, were there bombs on in the buildings?
Because they made 2 planes,
in the
not
first
one.
place, yeah. Because really, if you think about it, an aeroplane going into a building at such great force, with such impact, and with all that fuel you were talking about, Nigel, it would have impacted those 2 buildings that are really close together. It would have impacted. It would have done more than just blow the windows out of the building. I mean, I went to the Twin Towers the year before. Those buildings are quite close together. There's no way that such a large, form of transport, like an aeroplane, would not impact the second building. Anywho, that was edited out because you don't see the aeroplane actually coming out. Also as well, there's other footage that if you look closely, if you zoom in, you can actually see tiny little explosions happening on different floors. Little tiny like puffs of smoke, and you can see it coming out of the side, and you can see it front on as well, which kind of gives you the theory, or the conspiracy theory, is that what they've done is they've actually
Badly set up the bombs.
Put bombs on every floor in order for the whole building to collapse. Because I'm not sure whether or not an aeroplane impact into such a sturdy, huge building would bring a building down.
From top to bottom.
Yeah, unless you had backup, which would be the tiny bombs on every floor. And you can actually see the little explosions happening.
Yeah.
So I don't know what those explosions were caused by. Also as well, the whole theory about the building itself, made of steel, the steel melted. It's
like the Bessemer process, it takes a lot of heat to melt steel.
It really does, and takes a long period of time to melt steel as well. It's not just like the impact of a plane and then a few minutes later the building comes down. It's like it would take a while, chemically to melt that much
More
steel.
than the 20 minutes that it did take.
Yeah, because it wouldn't have just been like piddly rods of steel, it would have been like really big, thick masses, chunky things of, rods of steel. So it would have taken a while in order for it to melt. So anyway, that's kind of my idea on it.
Yeah, I mean, remember how I started this argument. The whole basis is supposed to be the factor that there were 4 planes. That's what was already predicted, that was already set out on the news. So when one plane had actually hit the tower, which actually theory believes that it might be a drone plane, the idea would also be that they needed a second plane to hit the tower. But we never actually saw the footage. We only saw the building coming down. We've seen everybody's various phones saying the building's coming down. And again, that building came down the exact same way and shorter time span than the first building falling, if you actually think about it. So again, conspiracy. So to rebuttal this point about these planes going down, Malcolm.
Conspiracy theory says that you couldn't create that kind of damage with 2 airplanes. And on the other hand, it comes across with the argument that there are explosions that bring the apart in any case. The argument seems to be defeats itself, because if you're saying the airplanes weren't enough, yet a couple of explosions would bring it down. I mean, you make up your mind, does the explosions cause it to fall and the airplanes can't? You know what I mean? You're arguing on one point that the airplanes wouldn't be enough to cause it to collapse.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you're arguing that a number of explosions would make
Well,
it
yeah,
collapse.
because
No.
they're strategically set to
Both
bring the
together.
building down.
Both together, they would.
Or
Explosion
or
of an
just the
airplane.
explosions
So
alone.
you
would.
use an airplane full of people to bring the building down. Why? Why not more explosions?
I don't know, it's for you to tell us why.
Well, no, I'm arguing against it. And I don't see why a series of explosions would bring down a building. The same theorists, these conspiracy theorists, come up with it. An airplane couldn't do it. Yeah, these bombs could. And why use bombs on an airplane, doesn't make sense. If you're going to use explosives, you use explosives. If you're going to use an airplane, use an airplane.
So is that your point about why the
Well,
buildings
I'm
actually went down?
from that.
Yeah.
I don't argue that much on his point.
Nah.
There's nothing much to say.
All right, see, I'm being kind of sneaky here because, in my final rebuttal on the side, right, I will tell you why. So, obviously, what we're going to do is we're going to show the actual video that where the plane, or the first plane, the only plane, actually was not a United Airlines plane, but a drone. It actually had a missile attached to the bottom of it. Footage of it from different cameras showed that it had no windows and no markings on the plane. But it did show that it had something in the undercarriage, which was a missile. The missile hit the building as the plane came towards it, and then the plane went right through the open hole of that missile, and that created the first explosionary attack. Now, what happens is the people that were in the building did not see a plane. In their phone calls to their parent families and all that kind of stuff, there was no talk about a plane. When they tried to get down below, they couldn't because of the fire of that explosion that plane missile created. And that's why we have the Fallen Man video where people had to just, fuck it, and they jumped over it and died. As far as the people that were in the building, through their phone calls and conversations, all they're talking about is there is a series of explosions, not one explosion. That's the key. That's the final nail in the coffin, is the phone evidence of various people telling you that there was a series of explosions.
There's also
not one.
interviews with people who survived who said they heard different explosions on different floors.
Exactly.
They were on a different floor and they had an explosion on their floor, so they went down.
Exactly. And as Hollywood Film always will tell you is that, you set a series of charges. The main set is in the basement, but then you have to set a series of them in the scaffolding and the structures throughout the building. Those were poorly set, probably because the building is a constant working building. So And that's another reason why I don't think this was Al Qaeda. I think it was actually our own CIA and our own spook government. But the whole point about that is that the building did not come down the way they first initially intended. So I really think it was a plan B to just bring it down that way and to bring down the second tower. But the footage of the planes going through the tower were also later released. They weren't released on the day. So the helicopter footage that's talking about, we saw something go through and come out the other side, you know, they're told, move on, right? Al Qaeda could not tell them that, but our government could, or air traffic control could. You know, the act of heroism from the people that are on that flight that the movie was made of in the so-called fourth plane. The idea is that how could we never hear about the people from that was on that plane? We never hear about their families or their story. How come no one thought, hey, look, a plane crashed into a building because terrorists took it over. Why don't I make that movie? But no, I'll make the heroic film about these magical Americans who took on these terrorists with a food trolley cart and managed to crash the plane. Yeah, I'll make that movie, and that's all anybody ever really remembers. So, like, the thing about it is that we have a extreme act of violence that was created on our home front, on our home soil, in the illusion for us to continue the war in Iraq, to continue to bid for oil, to continue this so-called Al Qaeda, ISIS, and everything else that's come to attack us on every front, so that way we could be in a country that doesn't belong to us and take the riches from that country.
We'll still use them as a scapegoat.
Well, everybody needs a scapegoat. That's just how our system is. So, like, the main thing about it is, as I said before, it's all about disinformation. You give the public enough information to have a debate, right? And really, neither of us have a strong leg to stand on, but I do stand on the factor of the sounds of multiple explosions, the phone calls that don't reflect on an airplane, right? The plane itself being a drone that fired a missile into that building, which is very simple to have done, and to follow that missile attack with a bomb that is let off from below. That's my theory. That's how I'm sticking to
video
it.
evidence.
Drop the mic.
Absolutely.
This idea of analysing the footage of the second plane striking the building and people claiming that there's some kind of missile being fired from the plane. When
You
you
watched that video too, man. I saw you.
When you see that little flash as the plane hits the building, some people claim that that's a missile being fired from the plane just a split second before it hits. What you're actually seeing is the metal fuselage of the plane striking the steel outside of the building. Let's also remember that these World Trade Center attacks happened quite early in the morning. It was early morning on the East Coast. The sun was still quite low in the sky, and that side of the building was in shadow. So what you're actually seeing on that footage is the plane flying into the shadow of the building and then striking the building. So that's why there is this kind of what the conspiracy theorists like to say is like a flash or an explosion on the building just before the plane hits. What you're actually seeing is the plane, the very front of the plane entering the shadow, so you can't see it anymore. But it is striking the building and causing that flash. So the first plane hitting only has that one piece of film footage, which was the footage of the fire crew inspecting a drain, and then the camera swings around and catches the plane hitting. So that
Magically.
that's not very well. Wouldn't you if you heard a very loud plane noise? So there's only that one piece of footage that's known of the very first plane hitting, but then of course when the second plane hits, everyone's there with their cameras and they're filming from all different angles. So
But people on the ground are saying they heard an explosion from below, not from above. They've heard explosions from the basement or from below. People on the ground have said that in those videos.
You know what though reminds me of the Kennedy assassination? You know when everyone had an opinion, the people who were there, they had an opinion, but no one was allowed to voice it.
Yeah.
So they all heard different things of different shots from different angles, and it's the same with this. It's like everyone heard what was happening at the time, but no one was allowed to voice it.
Yeah.
So just to cover that point about the so-called explosions that were heard in the buildings as they were collapsing, what we were actually hearing was each floor as it fell was hitting the floor below. And the mini explosions that have been described was the debris from that floor being blown out of the windows as the two floors hit
And that's
each other.
why we were saying we saw it in the video. This.
Yeah, and then of course the next one hits the floor below. So those mini
Okay, so why
explosions
didn't that
on each
happen
floor.
in Bootle recently then?
Because Voodoo had 2 more plans.
They had bombs on every floor and it didn't collapse
Just-
the way. Do you
just-
know what I mean?
Just to
Why-
clarify that obscure reference, where we were in Liverpool and there was a slightly amusing incident of a building that was supposed to be demolished by controlled explosions and it failed. You see several examples of this when demolition experts don't always get it right and they try to set off explosions in the building and it doesn't bring the building down. Well, that's a side issue as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but how would
That's a
that...
failure in demolition.
It is, but in comparison to like the Twin Towers, without explosions, how would they? It's just not possible for basically the floors to like collapse. I mean, it is for them to collapse in on each other, but not those explosions. The explosions.
Oh, I mean, I will have to say he has a point that the multiple collapses of the floors could sound like explosions to people who
Yeah,
were
but in
on the
order
Yeah,
to
so the
create
people
those...
who were there at the time and witnessed it, they were describing this kind of bang, 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 bang.
Yeah, which is what happens in an autumn.
And that was each floor very quickly hitting the floor below. So I'm perfectly satisfied that the buildings were brought down by the planes, the force of the explosion, the heat of the fire, rather than any kind of artificially created explosions on each floor.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's possible because I think they are. I mean, the Twin Towers compared to a normal tower block, they're like double the size. I actually don't think it's possible for the floors to fall in on each other without a little bit of help. Because if they can't do it, if they can't blow up a normal sized tower block without bombs on every single floor to help, how can they do it with the Twin Towers? Because the Twin Towers were massive in comparison. It's just not possible.
Got you there, but it's got you there.
Massive but modern design. You know, we can say that if a plane had hit the Empire State Building,
okay, but what we
that
need
would
to
probably
research
not
then
have
is when the
collapsed
Twin
because that was
Towers
much
were built.
more
When were the Twin Towers built?
soundly structured.
The towers were built
late 1960s, early 1970s. The Twin
Some
Towers
of
were built.
those bloody things have been all the 1960s architecture would have been similar because they were built in the 1960s, those awful tower blocks that they bring
Alright,
down.
save it for the after debate.
So those are my 2 points clarified. The plane striking the building and going into shadow, and the explanation of the supposedly explosions on each floor, but I think it was just the floors collapsing one on top of the other.
Alright. I think we did point out about this explosion theory, but you're trying to say this floors falling upon each other could give us that sound. I feel that those videos aren't doctored; they're actual release videos, like the Zapruder film. If when we talked about Kennedy, like if Kennedy was Clinton, you know, we would have so many different phone versions of that shooting, you know, that like it would knock the Zapruder film out of the box. So what do you guys think though? Anyway, I mean, are you not convinced? Because you did watch that video of the plane and all that, and this light coming from on the building before it hits, I totally disagree with your theory on it. There's no way that there would be a light on that building before it crashed through that building.
I didn't say there was a light before.
No, the video says it was, but you said that, oh, well, that's probably the light from something else, you said.
I'm saying that the light that you see on the building is the metal fuselage of the plane striking the metal exterior of the building.
It's like a spark.
Yeah, like a massive spark.
Before the plane hit, why would it spark?
As the plane hits, the moment of impact, you've got metal striking metal, and it creates a spark.
Yeah, but this was before the moment of
You know what
impact.
would be really interesting is that if you did some research into actually planes that size blowing up, you know, they always have like
Yeah. Yeah, like do they completely pulverize?
If the plane was to come down off
Yeah, because when we've seen plane crashes, and I don't mean lost, but when we see plane crashes, I mean there is some evidence of the plane. I mean it's the metal or some kind of remnant. Oh wow, that's a good point. All planes have black boxes. When was the black boxes put into play?
The black box from Flight 93 was found, and the
That's why they got added stuff for the film. You mean?
so you can hear the evidence. You know that the plane is being hijacked. You can hear the panic noises.
Well, how come there are no black boxes found in the wreckage of the towers?
The towers. We'll have to check on that actually, because I'm not sure if it was or wasn't found.
Well, if it was, we wouldn't be.
The explosion, I suspect the explosion was so severe that it actually destroyed the black boxes. But we need to check.
See,
on
that's what I find really interesting.
Convenient. I find it convenient. Every bit.
So really, we don't really know what went on. We don't know whether it was a genuine attack or whether it was a conspiracy, because all the evidence was destroyed, totally destroyed.
So that's my final.
It's a CCTV footage of the hijackers at the airport about to monitor and track their movements from where they came from to start with to the place that they then hijacked.
But wait a minute. There's also evidence that those guys are still alive. There's video. There's supposed to be video evidence that
The contract's been known.
Yeah. Hey, turn that towards me then. No, there's supposed to be evidence that tilted. There's supposed to be evidence that those guys that they've named as being the terrorists who were on those planes are actually still alive and everything like that. You know, like they were just given names because who cared? Like they're Al Qaeda. Here's some names of some known terrorists. But supposedly those guys are alive. I'll look for the video and stuff to back that up. But I mean, I've heard that.
I think whatever the case is, it's a very sad state of affairs that thousands of people died
Yeah.
on that day, and it makes me feel sick to think that it could possibly be a conspiracy and that whoever formulated, the whole event had such little thought about humanity really, and whether it be the government or whether it be, terrorists, it was just horrible.
Well, like the thing about, and that's the last thing I asked you, didn't I, Drew? I mean, like, being that, like, you didn't know who Al Qaeda was until this happened, and then they became a force of nature for a good 20, well, not going to say 20 years, but a good 10 years. Now we got ISIS, which is the new enemy. So what do you think about the theory that this could actually be a blacklist theory, that this was done by some secret, cabal or CIA or...
Well, again, I'm not convinced because Al Qaeda. We know that Al Qaeda did exist for a long time.
They were given a name through this event. They didn't have a name until this event.
Throughout the 90s, they were active. They were carrying out smaller scale attacks.
Yeah, I know, but I meant
they evolved from the Mujahideen, the Afghan freedom fighters and so on.
Yeah.
So it evolved.
Who got their weapons from CIA?
Well, yes, indeed.
So that's why they got their names.
That's the danger of meddling in foreign affairs, a lesson that America has learned the hard way. When you start training up a bunch of freedom fighters and then leave them to their own devices,
Exactly.
You can't be sure who they're going to fight. They might come back and
haunt you and bite you in the ass.
Yeah,
Right. So, but the government on this war on terrorism was able to exist for another good 10 years on the monies and budgets coming out of this attack on the homeland.
So what you're saying about you're saying this gave them the justification to be attacking, this justification to be like invading Iraq and doing all the things that the Bush administration.
I'm not saying anything because I don't want nobody coming at me. I'm just saying, what do you think? I made a point, but not specifically. I allegedly just stated, what do you think? That we haven't heard about this force until this attack, and we have a successful 10-year campaign on the war on terrorism. You know what I mean? And the only way to do that is to attack somebody in their home, right? And make you feel unsafe, and which we did feel, and everybody just went out with a mat on and said, yes, support everything that you're doing, and let's go get those guys. Well, no, it's strategic. It's not just because it's strategic. It's a plan in action, right? You need an enemy. It's like playing chess. You need an enemy to fight. And it's a risk.
There's always wars over.
Well, it's a way of warring without warring. I mean, because we didn't set off any nuclear missiles. We only sent soldiers over there to fight, because people wanted to kill people with their bare hands because of the tragedy. Do you know what I mean? So we sent thousands of soldiers in, and they've been there until Obama took most of them out. But still, most of them are still there. Yeah, of course. I mean, Desert Storm and everything else. So that, yeah, of course. They've been there already, but they sent more.
They sent more because people wanted revenge.
That's what I just said.
Well, Al-Qaeda chose Afghanistan to operate from because Afghanistan was a failed state. Being taken over by the Taliban, which was the same kind of. I'm reluctant to use the word religious because you can't call them true Muslims, but
No.
They operated by the same ideology, the Taliban and Al Qaeda, so they were obviously sympathetic to each other, and that's how Afghanistan became the base for Al Qaeda. And then, of course, after 9/11, that's when we got the Bush-led invasion of Afghanistan to try and eliminate Al Qaeda, which was always going to be a very difficult task to try and pick off these guerrilla fighters who were. So you're not going to. There's no way you can nuke them. The area is too big. You have to go in and fight this kind of one-on-one combat.
Also, it's the biggest poppy field in the world.
Oh, the opium trade, of course. Yes. The Al Qaeda were financed by the opium trade.
That is a commodity that I don't think they want to get rid of.
Who doesn't want to get rid of it?
No, because they need people to work it without going back to slavery. Anyway, I'm afraid that some guys in black suits might come after me. So we're gonna.
You brought on yourself, Chase.
I didn't say anything. This is a class exercise. It's all for debate purposes only. And it's fun. What do you believe? That's all I got to say. Right? Cut that, right, Rachel?